In the soft, rolling hills of ancient Ireland, beneath the twilight sky that shimmered with the light of 1,000 stars, there lived a people bound to the land by the rhythm of cattle and the heartbeat of myth. The earth, rich and dark, knew the weight of time. The wind whispered secrets that had long settled in the bones of stone and water. Here, in the kingdom of Ulster, the ancient stories lived, as real and enduring as the stones themselves. You are drifting now, beyond the reach of modern times, to a world where warriors of legend stand tall against the tides of fate, and the very earth hums with the memory of battles won and lost. Let yourself slip into that time, where gods walked among men, and heroes were made through the bending of destiny itself. Tonight our tale begins under the vast whispering skies of ancient Ulster, in the days when the great warriors of the land were called to fight for honour, for glory, for cattle. Yes, cattle, those majestic creatures whose sleek hides and strong bones made them more than simple beasts. In Ireland, cattle were wealth. They were life itself. And the brown bull of Cooley, the finest of them all, was coveted above all others. The cattle raid that would bring all things to a head began in a place of stillness, where the quiet echoes of the past seemed to hum beneath the surface of the earth. It was a place where stories waited to be told, and yet it is not just the cattle we must look to, nor even the kings and queens who desired them. It is the story of a single man, a boy, really, whose name would echo across time like a storm on the wind. He was a child of prophecy, born of fate, and destined to become the Hound of Ulster. His name was Cú Chulainn. In the flickering shadows of this distant land, before the clash of armies, before the cries of warriors filled the air, Cú Chulainn was but a boy, scarcely more than a child, with wild hair and a fierce heart. Yet fate had touched him early. Prophecies spun around him, marking him for greatness, even as they warned of the deep and terrible cost that greatness would bring. You may feel the wind now as it carries the weight of ancient promises, brushing through the long grass, moving with the restlessness of an impending storm. The world was quiet, but beneath the stillness the hum of destiny played a song too strong to ignore. If this story has brought you a moment of peace, let your support be known with a gentle click to subscribe. And more myths will come to find you. Let the world of myth draw you in softly, like a lullaby that carries you beyond the edge of sleep. For soon the air will thicken with the whispers of armies marching, the clash of shields, the hooves of galloping horses. But for now the night holds its breath. The stage is set. The tale of the Táin Bó Cúailnge, the Cattle Raid of Cooley, begins as quietly as a single leaf falling from a tree, drifting toward the ground in the hush of the evening, and as the moon climbs higher, we turn toward the horizon. The armies are assembling, though none of them know the cost. Only the land, ancient and wise, watches in silence. In the heart of Connaught, the winds carried the promise of a great and bold ambition. Queen Medb, sovereign of this land, a woman of fierce beauty and sharp mind, looked out across her kingdom with eyes that burned with desire. She was not a woman to be easily satisfied, nor one to let her wishes go unfulfilled. And now there was something she wanted more than anything else: the brown bull of Cooley. The brown bull was no ordinary beast. It was a creature of mythic renown, its strength unmatched, its hide as dark and rich as the soil after the harvest rains. Possessing the bull would cement Medb's place in history. It would be a symbol of her might, her sovereignty, and her unyielding will. But there was a catch. The brown bull belonged to the kingdom of Ulster. Ulster was a land filled with warriors, steeped in the blood of heroes. Its people were fierce, their warriors unmatched, their honour bound to the very hills upon which they lived. Yet despite the strength of the Ulster men, Medb saw a weakness, a gap in the armour that she could exploit. For Ulster, though mighty, was in the grip of a curse, one that had befallen them like a dark cloud on the horizon. The curse, as whispered in the corners of the world, was a deep and binding spell, cast by the Druids of long ago. It rendered the men of Ulster powerless, unable to fight in times of war, for they were bound by a great and terrible compulsion to rest. Only for a short period, yet it was enough for Medb to make her move. With the curse upon them, the men of Ulster would be unable to rise to defend their kingdom when Medb's army came for the brown bull. It was the perfect time to strike. The armies began to gather in the heart of Connaught. The banners were raised high, fluttering in the wind like birds of prey. The earth seemed to tremble under the weight of their preparation, as if the land itself knew what was coming. The warriors sharpened their spears, their swords gleaming like the rising sun, and the drummers began their solemn beat, a slow, rhythmic sound that stirred something primal in the hearts of those who heard it. Medb sat upon her throne, her golden hair cascading down her shoulders, her face like a mask of calm resolve. Beside her stood Ailill, her king, her consort, but there was tension in the air. Even as the preparations were made, Ailill could sense something in the wind, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He knew the legends. He knew that the men of Ulster would not go down so easily. The people of Connaught were eager for glory, eager for the plunder and spoils that would come with victory. Yet there was a sense that they did not fully understand the weight of what they were about to undertake. They spoke of the cattle and the riches, but they did not know the hero who stood waiting for them, the boy who had yet to truly know his fate, Cú Chulainn. And yet for now the Queen's resolve remained unbroken. Her gaze turned, westward, toward the land of Ulster, toward the brown bull that would soon be hers. Her army would march at dawn. In the stillness of the night, the air was thick with the anticipation of what was to come. The earth hummed with it. The stars blinked in the sky, as though watching the unfolding of destiny. For though Medb had plotted and schemed, she could not know the forces that lay beyond her control. The land would answer her greed, but not in the way she expected. In Ulster, the curse had taken its toll, but there was one who stood outside its grip. One boy, the Hound of Ulster, was untouched. Cú Chulainn, though young, was not bound by the spell that held his kin, and as Medb's armies prepared to march, he too prepared, though his heart was still a storm of uncertainty. The night deepened, and stillness settled once more. Soon the earth would tremble with the march of soldiers, the sound of hooves and weapons. Soon the rivers would run red, and the hills would echo with the cries of warriors. But now, in the quiet of this moment, let the night wrap itself around you like a soft, warm cloak. Let the stars above watch over you, as they have watched over so many before. The wind was restless that night in Ulster. It stirred the branches of ancient trees, whispering secrets to those who would listen. Under the weight of the curse that bound them, the men of the land lay in quiet slumber, their strength drained by an unseen force. The halls of Emain Macha, the great fortress of Ulster, stood silent, their walls heavy with the weight of prophecy, of past battles, of unspoken fears. Yet there was one among them who could not sleep, Cú Chulainn. Though a mere boy, scarcely more than a youth, his heart was already hardened by the fires of fate. His name had been whispered by the winds before his birth, spoken by the druids in quiet incantations, and etched in the stars above. From the moment he had drawn breath, the world had known that his path would be one of greatness, but also of deep, unrelenting cost. The curse upon Ulster was a dark thing, a web spun by ancient forces, and yet it could not touch Cú Chulainn. His fate had been sealed long before by the gods themselves, for in him was the heart of a hero, and no curse could extinguish that fire. He lay awake now, staring into the shadows of his chamber, listening to the quiet sounds of the night, the soft rustling of the wind, the distant calls of owls, the gentle drip of water from the stone walls. It was then that he heard it. A voice, deep and otherworldly, seemed to rise from the very earth beneath him, carrying with it a chill that made the hairs on his arms stand up. It was not a voice of fear, but one of urgency, of destiny. The voice spoke of the coming battle, of the invasion from Connaught, of the brown bull of Cooley, and of the warriors who would march to claim it. And it spoke of him. Cú Chulainn, child of prophecy, son of Lugh, the time has come. He sat up in bed, his mind racing. The words seemed to reverberate through his chest, filling him with a sense of purpose. He had known this day would come, had felt the stirrings of something greater than himself. But now that it was upon him, the weight of it felt heavy, as though the world itself were holding its breath, waiting to see what he would do. He stood from his bed, his bare feet touching the cold stone floor. The room was dimly lit, the flickering fire casting long shadows on the walls. His heart pounded in his chest as he pulled on his tunic and fastened his sword to his side. The sword, his father's sword, was an heirloom, a thing of legend, and though he had yet to fully understand the power it held, he knew that it would carry him through what was to come. He stepped into the night. the cool air wrapping around him like a lover's embrace. The sky above was clear, and the stars seemed to burn with an intensity he'd never seen before. The moon hung low on the horizon, casting a silver light across the fields. His feet carried him, almost without thinking, to the training grounds. Here, the echoes of past warriors lingered, their strength and courage etched into the very stones beneath his feet. He had trained here many times, had fought with his brothers in arms, had honed his skills under the watchful eye of his mentor, the great warrior Laeg. But tonight, the air was different. There was a hum of something ancient in the earth, a power that resonated in his bones. It was then that Laeg appeared, stepping from the shadows as though he had been waiting for Cú Chulainn all along. The older warrior's face was grave, his eyes heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. "The time has come, young one," Laeg said softly, his voice a mixture of pride and concern. "Your people are bound by a curse, but you, Cú Chulainn, are not. It falls to you to defend Ulster. The brown bull of Cooley, the armies of Connaught, they march even now. Your destiny awaits you, though the price may be great." Cú Chulainn nodded, his heart steady. He had always known that this moment would come, but the weight of it was different now. It was not just about the cattle, the glory, or even the war. It was about his people, his kin, and the land that had raised him. "I will not let them take our land, Laeg," he said, his voice fierce with the resolve of a young man who had already seen the face of death and stood firm against it. "I will fight, I will defend Ulster, and I will make them remember the name of Cú Chulainn." Laeg looked at him, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "You are a child of prophecy, Cú Chulainn, but prophecy is not always kind. Be wary of your strength, for it will bring both victory and ruin." But Cú Chulainn did not heed his warning. The fire in his heart burned too brightly. He stepped forward, his body a blur of motion as he unsheathed his sword, feeling its weight, its power in his hands. The night around him seemed to grow still, as if the very world was waiting. The earth beneath his feet, the sky above, the stars, they all seemed to hold their breath. And in that moment, Cú Chulainn knew that his fate had already been sealed. The path was before him, and there was no turning back. The battle for Ulster was about to begin. As the first rays of dawn stretched across the horizon, the world seemed to hold its breath. The sky, once dark and filled with the whispers of night, was now touched with hues of soft orange and deep purple. The mist that clung to the earth began to lift, revealing the rolling hills and vast plains of Ulster, where quiet fields had once known only the peaceful sound of cattle grazing. But today, the land was silent in anticipation. In the distance, the war drums of Connaught could already be heard. Their deep rhythmic beat pulsed through the air, carrying with it the march of an army that had no intention of turning back. Queen Medb, with her golden crown and fierce heart, had sent her warriors forward to claim what she desired most, the brown bull of Cooley, the prize that would elevate her to a throne beyond even her dreams. But even now, in this moment of peace before the storm, the land of Ulster was not without its protectors. Though the men of Ulster lay weak, bound by the curse that kept them from war, there was one among them whose strength had not been sapped, one whose name was already becoming a legend, Cú Chulainn. The young hero stood at the gates of Immerse, the great fortress of Ulster, his eyes scanning the horizon where the smoke of the approaching armies began to rise. The air was thick with the scent of earth and fire, and the faintest hint of battle drifted on the breeze. He was alone, save for Laeg, who stood beside him, his eyes dark with worry. "The time has come," Laeg murmured, his voice thick with an ancient understanding. "You know what must be done, young one." Cú Chulainn nodded, his gaze unwavering. He had no doubt in his heart. The curse upon his people could not touch him, and it was his destiny to protect Ulster from the coming storm. The brown bull of Cooley, the pride of Connaught, might have sparked this war, but it was something much deeper, something ancient that had set the wheels of fate into motion. As he stepped forward, the first rays of sunlight gleamed off his sword, its edge gleaming with the promise of the battles to come. Cú Chulainn could feel it now, that familiar pulse of power that thrummed beneath his skin. The moment he had been waiting for was at hand, and there was no turning back. His feet carried him forward, toward the northern border of Ulster, where he would make his stand. The wind whispered in his ears, and as he passed the great gates of Immerse, The very earth seemed to stir beneath his feet. The warriors of Ulster, though bound by the curse, had come to watch. They knew that their strength lay in Cú Chulainn, in the boy who was destined to become their champion. Their eyes were filled with a quiet reverence, and for a moment the weight of their gaze seemed to fill him with a solemn pride. But there was no time for pride now. In the distance, Cú Chulainn could see the smoke rising higher, could hear the sound of hooves striking the earth, of the rattle, of shields and spears. The armies of Connaught were not far behind, their banners fluttering in the wind like dark omens, their warriors marching with purpose. And so the battle began. The first of the Connaught warriors reached the border of Ulster, their footsteps shaking the ground beneath them. Cú Chulainn did not hesitate. With a speed that seemed almost unnatural for one so young, he leaped forward, his sword raised high, its edge shining in the early light. He met the first warrior head-on, his blade cutting through the air with a sound that rang like thunder. The man before him was tall, broad-shouldered, a warrior hardened by many battles. But before he could even raise his weapon in defence, Cú Chulainn's sword had already struck, slicing through his armour with a force that left no room for mercy. The man crumpled to the earth, his blood staining the soil of Ulster, a crimson mark that would remain as a reminder of the boy who had become a living storm. Yet there was no time to mourn the fallen. The battle had only just begun. From the corner of his eye, Cú Chulainn saw the next wave of Connaught warriors charging forward, their faces twisted with rage and bloodlust. The earth beneath his feet seemed to tremble as they advanced, the sound of their hooves like thunder in his ears. But even as the odds seemed insurmountable, Cú Chulainn did not falter. His heart, steady and strong, beat in time with the rhythm of the battle. And then it happened. A surge of power, ancient and primal, swept through him like a wave crashing against the shore. His vision blurred, and for a moment he felt as though he were no longer standing upon the earth, but suspended in the very air itself. His body contorted in a way that was not human, his muscles rippling with an unearthly strength. Cú Chulainn had entered the Riastrad, the warp spasm. His face twisted with a terrible fury, his eyes glowing with the fire of battle. His body, once a boy's frame, now seemed to grow and shift, his limbs lengthening, his form becoming something more than human, a creature of fury and vengeance. He was no longer the young hero. He was something beyond that, something older, something divine. And it was then that the full weight of his power was unleashed. With a roar that shook the heavens, Cú Chulainn plunged into the fray. His sword became an extension of his will, a force of nature that cleaved through the Connaught warriors with an almost effortless grace. No one could stand against him. His movements were fluid and precise, each strike a death sentence for those foolish enough to come too close. The ground was littered with the fallen, their blood staining the earth beneath him as he fought on, unstoppable, a blur of motion, a whirlwind of death. Yet despite the bloodshed, despite the violence, there was something almost serene about it. Cú Chulainn fought not for glory, not for riches, but for the land he loved, for his kin, for his people. His rage was not blind. It was a force of protection, of love. As the sun climbed higher, the battle raged on. The armies of Connaught were fierce, but they were nothing against the wrath of the Hound of Ulster. And in the midst of it all, Cú Chulainn stood, his sword raised high, the storm of his fury unmatched, his destiny unfolding before him like the pages of an ancient tome. The fight was far from over, but for now Ulster was safe. For now the land was his to defend. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its golden rays casting long shadows across the battlefield. The air was thick with the scent of blood and sweat, the cries of men ringing out like the distant howls of wolves. But even in the midst of this chaos, there was an undeniable rhythm to Cú Chulainn's movements. His body moved as if guided by something far greater than mere instinct. He was not simply fighting, he was becoming the storm itself. The Connaught warriors pressed on, charging forward with the ferocity of wolves hunting their prey. But each one that met Cú Chulainn's sword fell without mercy. His strength, his speed, his skill. It was as if the earth itself had imbued him with its very essence, its ancient fury. His strikes were precise, unstoppable, and as each warrior fell to his blade, another rushed in to take his place, but there was no end in sight. As Cú Chulainn cleaved through their ranks, His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He had trained for this. He had prepared for this. But no matter how many warriors fell beneath him, the feeling that something greater than this was coming, something darker, weighed heavily on his heart. The Riastrad, the warp spasm, had taken hold of him in full force. It was both his strength and his curse. It transformed him from a mere boy into a creature of boundless rage, a force of nature, a protector of Ulster, a destroyer of enemies. And yet, as much as he felt the thrill of battle, he knew the price. This power, this divine, terrifying power, was not meant for long use. It took from him, drained him, piece by piece. Each time he unleashed it, he felt a part of himself slip away, as if the very act of becoming a living weapon was pulling him further from his humanity. The man he was, the boy who had once played in the fields of Ulster, was becoming something else, something that could not perhaps be fully called human at all. The soldiers of Connaught, however, could not have known the cost of the power they faced. They had heard the stories, the rumours of Cú Chulainn's fierce strength, but nothing could have prepared them for the sight of him now. His eyes burned with a fire that could not be quenched, and his movements were a blur, a dance of death and destruction. But it was not just his enemies who were watching. From the hills surrounding the battlefield, the people of Ulster looked on in awe and fear. They had seen their champion rise to meet the enemy, and yet, as the battle wore on, their concern grew. They had heard the stories of the Riastrad, of the warp spasm, and knew that no hero could bear its weight forever. In the midst of the battle, Leg stood at the edge of the field, his eyes scanning the scene. He had seen many battles in his time, but none like this. None where a single warrior fought with the fury of a storm, with the power of the gods themselves. Leg's heart ached, with a strange mix of pride and dread. He knew that Cú Chulainn's strength was undeniable, but even the gods themselves were bound by the laws of fate. Cú Chulainn, Leg whispered under his breath, watching as the boy hero cut down yet another warrior, his sword flashing like a streak of lightning in the sky. What will be left of you when the storm has passed? Far from the battle's front, Queen Meb watched with a different kind of focus. From the safety of her camp, high upon a hill, she observed the carnage with a cold, calculating gaze. She had planned this raid meticulously, and yet even she had underestimated the power of Cú Chulainn. His strength was not just the stuff of warriors, it was the power of a force far beyond her reach. The brown bull of Cooley was still her goal, her prize, but now the cost of that prize was becoming more apparent. It was not enough to simply defeat the men of Ulster. She would have to deal with the boy who had become their living weapon, their hound, their protector. A hero of mythic proportions, untouchable and unrelenting. The battle raged on for hours, the clash of steel and the cries of warriors filling the air. Yet, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, a strange calm settled over the battlefield. Cú Chulainn, his body covered in blood, his muscles trembling with exhaustion, stood alone in the centre of it all. The Connaught army had faltered. Their lines had broken. They had not anticipated a single warrior, a mere boy, to stand against them with such fury. Yet the cost was visible in his eyes. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his body, once a blur of movement, now sagged with the weight of his power. His sword was still clutched tightly in his hand, but his grip was weakening. The Riastrad had taken its toll. It always did. The warriors of Connaught hesitated now, seeing their comrades' fallen bodies littering the field, but knowing that no one, no matter how powerful, could fight forever. As the night began to fall, Cú Chulainn fell to his knees, his sword slipping from his grasp. The Riastrad had receded, leaving him once again a boy. The boy who had been destined for greatness, but now felt its terrible cost, his mind filled with a fog of exhaustion and pain, his body trembling from the strain of his own fury. The Connaught warriors, sensing his weakness, gathered their courage and prepared to charge once more. But something had changed. A stillness had settled over the battlefield, as though the very earth was holding its breath. And then, from behind the hills, came a figure, another hero of legend, a figure whose presence was like the light of the moon breaking through a storm. It was Fergus MacRoish, the great warrior of Ulster, who had once stood at the side of Cú Chulainn, but had been bound by the curse. Now, seeing his champion in danger, he rode to the battlefield, his battle cry shaking the air. With one final resounding cry, Fergus led the charge, and the warriors of Ulster, freed from the curse their strength, returning, rose to their feet. The storm of battle raged once more, but for Cú Chulainn it was enough. His body had given all it could. The weight of his destiny, of his power, would be carried forward by the next wave of warriors, for now his duty was done. The moon rose high above the battlefield, casting a pale light on the scene of carnage below. The clash of weapons had grown quieter now, as the first waves of battle faded into the night. Blood soaked the earth, and the bodies of fallen warriors lay scattered like broken pieces of a forgotten tale. The wind carried the scent of war, sharp and heavy, but there was something else in the air now, an unease that clung to the earth, like the weight of a prophecy unfulfilled. Cú Chulainn, once a force of nature, now sat upon the cold ground, his back leaning against a jagged rock. His body, battered and worn from hours of fighting, trembled with exhaustion. The last of the Riastrad, the warp spasm, had left him drained, the fierce power he had summoned now slipping away like sand through his fingers. His sword, still stained with the blood of his enemies, lay beside him, but he had no strength left to lift it. It was then that he heard the voice. Cú Chulainn. It came softly, like the whisper of the wind, but it was unmistakable. It was the voice of Leg, his mentor and friend, the one who had guided him through countless trials. He could not see him yet, but he could feel his presence, standing at the edge of the battlefield watching over him. You have done enough, Leg's voice continued, filled with a quiet, almost sorrowful pride. Your strength has carried Ulster through the storm, but the time has come for others to take the mantle. Rest, my boy. Let the warriors of Ulster rise in your place. Cú Chulainn's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. He had done what he was meant to do, protected his land, defended his people. But the cost, oh, the cost was great. His youth, his innocence, his very humanity. He could feel them slipping away with each battle he fought. The strength of the gods that had coursed through him, the fury of the Riastrad had been a gift and a curse in equal measure. But even in this moment of stillness he could feel the weight of the war still pressing upon him. Ulster was not yet safe, and Medb's armies still threatened to overrun the land. Far in the distance the army of Connaught had regrouped, the survivors of the day's bloodshed gathering their forces for one final push. Queen Medb's banner still flew high, her gaze never leaving the battlefield. The brown bull of Cooley, her prize, was still within reach, and she would not give it up without a fight. But something had shifted. The warriors of Ulster, once bound by the curse, now found themselves freed, their strength returning. The battle was not over, but it had turned. The winds of fate had shifted, and with them, the tide of war. Fergus MacRoich, the great warrior of Ulster, stood tall upon his steed, his voice a rallying cry for his people. For Ulster! For the Hound of Ulster, he called, and the warriors of Ulster, their strength renewed, surged forward, their battle cries echoing across the hills. Cú Chulainn, though weary beyond measure, watched them rise with a quiet pride in his heart. The men of Ulster, his brothers in arms, were now ready to carry on the fight. He had defended them long enough. The time had come for them to take their place upon the battlefield and carry the banner of Ulster to victory. But as he watched the tide of battle turn, a deep, aching weariness settled over him. He had given all he had, but the price of his power had been steep. The strength of the gods had come at a cost he could not yet fully comprehend. Rest, Cú Chulainn. Leg's voice came again, softer now. You have given everything. Let the land heal. Let the warriors rise in your place. Cú Chulainn nodded, his eyes heavy with the weight of his own fate. He had never asked for this destiny, never sought the path of a hero, but it had come for him, just as it comes for all those touched by prophecy. And though the pain of it, the isolation, the burden of it weighed heavily on him, he knew deep down that it was the path he was meant to walk. With a final lingering breath, he closed his eyes and allowed himself to rest. The winds of battle still howled in the distance, but they no longer seemed to call to him. The earth beneath him, the land of Ulster that he had fought for so fiercely, seemed to embrace him now, offering a moment of peace amidst the chaos. In the distance, the warriors of Ulster fought on, their strength fueled by the memory of Cú Chulainn's sacrifice, by the legend of the Hound of Ulster, who had stood alone against an entire army. And as the night deepened and the stars began to twinkle above, Cú Chulainn's name would live on, whispered by the wind, sung by the bards, carried in the hearts of those who would remember the boy who became a living storm, who gave all for his land and his people. The battle was not yet won, but the legend of Cú Chulainn would live forever. The night deepened, and the moon hung high in the sky, casting in its ethereal light over the battlefield, which had grown still in the wake of the fighting. The clash of swords and shields had given way to the haunting silence of the aftermath. The wounded lay scattered across the field, their bodies marked by both valour and fate. The warriors of Ulster, invigorated by the presence of their champions, had turned the tide, and now the remaining Connaught forces were retreating, broken and weary. But as the night wore on, the figure of Cú Chulainn remained in the hearts and minds of all who witnessed the battles that had unfolded. Though his body rested now, the weight of his sacrifice would echo across Ulster for generations to come. His spirit lingered in the air like the wind that carried the tales of the ancient warriors, tales that would never fade, that would always be retold by the firesides of those who came after. The warriors of Ulster, standing victorious, looked toward the boy who had given everything for them. They had heard the stories of Cú Chulainn's strength, his courage, his near-mythic powers, but no one had truly understood what it meant to be the Hound of Ulster. To carry the mantle of a hero, to fight with the fury of the gods and pay the price for that power, was a burden few could bear. And now, as the stars twinkled softly above them, the warriors saw something else, something deeper than mere battle. In Cú Chulainn's fall, in the moment of his exhaustion and weariness, they saw the true cost of heroism. His strength had been a gift, yes, but it had also been a curse. His destiny, though magnificent, was not one to envy. It was a reminder that the land's greatest protectors, the ones who rose in moments of dire need, were also the ones most deeply scarred by their calling. Cú Chulainn's name would live on, passed down in song and story. He would be remembered not only as the champion of Ulster, the one who stood alone against the fury of an invading army, but as a symbol of the land's struggle. His tale would echo across the generations, a lesson of sacrifice, strength, and the price of pride. But now, in the quiet that followed the storm, the warriors gathered around their fallen champion, their hearts heavy with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. They had won the battle, but the cost was undeniable. Cú Chulainn's battle was over, but the legacy of his spirit, his sacrifice, was only beginning. "The Hound of Ulster," Fergus MacRoich said softly, his voice carrying the weight of years of battle, of friendship and loss. He knelt beside Cú Chulainn, placing a hand on the young hero's head in reverence. "You fought not for glory, not for riches, but for the land and the people. Your name will live on as long as the rivers run and the stars light the sky." The other warriors nodded in agreement, their heads bowed in silence. The landscape around them seemed to shift, as if it too mourned the loss of such a fierce and loyal protector. The earth was soaked with the blood of both friend and foe, but it would bear the mark of Cú Chulainn for all eternity. As the stars continued to twinkle above them, the night took on an almost sacred quality. There was something timeless in the air, something that spoke of the past and the future intertwining. The battle may have been won, but the echoes of war, of loss, would linger. The land itself, with its ancient hills and rivers, seemed to absorb the weight of the tale, an old story made new once more. In the hearts of the people of Ulster, the story of Cú Chulainn would be passed down with reverence, whispered by mothers to their children, sung by bards to the rhythm of the harp. The Hound of Ulster, brave, fierce, loyal, would live on, a beacon of what it meant to defend one's land, one's kin, even at the cost of one's own soul. As the warriors of Ulster returned to their homes, the wind shifted, and the air seemed to carry a softer, gentler tone. The battle had been won, but the true victory lay in the strength of the people who carried on. The warriors who had stood beside Cú Chulainn now carried his flame, and they too would stand in the face of whatever came next. Cú Chulainn's spirit, though his body was left behind on the battlefield, would never truly leave Ulster. His presence would endure in the whisper of the wind, in the rustling of the leaves, in the call of the raven that circled above the hills, and in the hearts of all those who fought for the land he loved. The brown bull of Cooley, though desired by many, had become a symbol of something greater than wealth. It had become a symbol of what was worth fighting for: the land, the people, the heart of Ulster itself. As the quiet settled once more over the battlefield, the warriors of Ulster, tired and bloodied, could finally breathe. They had lost a champion, but they had gained something far more precious, a lesson in sacrifice, in loyalty, and in the price of power. And as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, it seemed as though the land itself had taken a deep, weary breath. The winds that had carried the echoes of battle now carried the echoes of Cú Chulainn's name, forever remembered, forever honoured. And with that, the story of the Táin Bó Cúailnge, the Cattle Raid of Cooley, passed into the eternal flow of time, a tale that would never truly end, but continue to live in the hearts of all who believed in the power of myth, the strength of heroes, and the cost of defending one's homeland.